Folks, hello, good evening. Can I start with a really dumb question? My name is Leo Johnson. I'm going to be the moderator for the panel. Okay. I went and got a cup of tea before this, to lift the whatever in this really, Monday afternoon. I went to the local Starbucks. Is this a local tea? Raise your hand if you think this is a local tea. Raise your hand if you think this is not a local tea. Okay, so we reckon we know what local is. Okay, fine, let's just ask, since you got all the answers, who here thinks there's going to be a hung parliament? Raise your hand if you think there's going to be a hung parliament. Oh, that's not many. Raise your hand if you think there's going to be a thumping big majority for someone. Keep your hand up if you think it's going to be for the Labour Party. Okay. We'll get back onto the topic at hand. We're going to talk about, and by the way, is there any one party who owns the space of localism, who we know is really good for local? Who is it? Who?
Greens.
The Greens? The Lib Dems say it's the Lib Dems. Okay, interesting. Is anyone's vote going to go on that basis? Okay, I just asked a series of questions which really did not resonate at all with the interest of them. I thought I was very interested in those questions. All right, I'm going to get out of the way. We got a set of brilliant panelists here, and I very cunningly staged it. So we got two major incumbent businesses here, i.e., Mike and Bola, and I want to get a bit of back and forth, a bit of critique from the startup innovators in the form of Claire and Lucy here. So what I'd love to do, if it's okay with you, is one of you two decide to start and kick it off and tell us about the brilliant stuff you're doing, and then it'd be really nice if you just gave a really honest couple of thoughts, and then we'll sort of flip it around, and then let's see what happens from there, and we'll open it up to the room a bit at some point, and I'll stop asking random questions, and then it'll... Okay, so can one of you two go on? Tell us, from your perspective, going local, does it work? Secrets, lessons, challenges?
Right. So apparently it's age before beauty, so I'm going first.
And maybe give a little bit of an introduction about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Bola Gibson. If you were at the crowd a while ago, you might have certain flashbacks because you might remember that Leo and Mike and I might have eaten some bugs the last time we were on a stage together. So thankfully that's not happening this evening, so you don't have to leave the room. So I head up community engagement at TSB. Essentially, that covers our charity partnerships, it covers our volunteering, it also covers a museum that we have up in Scotland, which I might mention a little bit later. For those of you who don't know, TSB, although it might sound like an incumbent, it's actually a relatively young business. So it was formed out of the banking crisis. It was actually a penalty to Lloyds Banking Group. They had to sell off or strip out about 630 branches. And that was essentially formed into TSB, which is now an independent company. It has about 4.5 million customers. We have about 580 branches across Britain, and we've got about 8,500 people who work for the business. So it's still quite a big business. When we were looking to actually set up TSB as a bank out of the ashes of the banking crisis, TSB actually did some research and talked to thousands. We spent hours talking to consumers. And what was really fascinating was that under 20% of them felt that banks actually thought about their role in wider society, actually thought about their kind of community purpose, their social purpose. And so when TSB was being set up, there was actually a very deliberate kind of pause and thinking about, well, what kind of bank are we really going to be? And to do that, we actually looked back to 1810 which is when a reverend up in Dumfriesshire, in Ruthwell in Dumfries, set up the world's first self-sustaining savings bank. So back in 1810, banking was actually a very elitist kind of industry. It wasn't accessible to the average person. You needed something like £10 to be able to open up a bank account when people were earning something like, sixpence or something. So what Henry Duncan did was he made an arrangement with the local bank and had all the hard-working local people who were shoving their pennies into their mattresses or into their walls, and got them to pool their resources together so they could save individually, and collectively that money would get deposited into a bank. So essentially a really simple concept, but it was the world's first self-sustaining essential bank that gave local people access to secure futures. Very, very simple banking. Scoot forward 200 years, and essentially the leaders at TSB did not want to go back to the banking that caused the financial crisis. So we went back to what we considered to be local banking. So a very simple banking model where people could deposit their money. They could borrow from the money that was deposited to fund their mortgages and other lending. So we didn't do anything complex. So that was the first thing. When it came to thinking about local banking as well, in terms of the work that we did with communities, for me it was quite simple. If you're going to do local banking, let's do local, which meant going hyperlocal, which a lot of the retailers actually have done for many years, but actually the banks haven't. So we looked at three areas. We looked at our charity partnerships, we looked at volunteering, and we looked at our sponsorship activity. So from a charity partnership point of view, we scrapped the National Charity of the Year back in 2015 and decided that every branch and every office site and every contact centre could choose its own local, independently registered organisation to support. With volunteering, we looked at how we can help our branch partners better connect with their local communities. And the charity partnerships piece does this as well. So essentially, what we are trying to do is give our people tools to connect with their local communities. So with our volunteering, we have a schools engagement program where our partners can go into schools from primary level all the way up to senior level to deliver presentations, whether it's on fraud or the history of money or financial management. And then with sponsorship, we support Pride of Britain and Pride of Sport. Now, that's really more about celebrating local and really trying to help people recognize that sense of local pride. So most people think of Pride of Britain and Pride of Sport as a big glitzy event that happens once a year on ITV. That is the culmination of it, but one of the things that TSB are trying to do is make it all year round so that people are recognized all year round. So for example, this year we've trialled 2 regional events where we've recognised people in Birmingham with Pride of Birmingham and Pride of the Northeast up in the Northeast. So we have gone local. I can tell you it's not easy going local when you have 500-600 outlets and 8,500 people. But we've done it and we're still learning. But what's been really interesting is the feedback that we get from going local. So for example, with our charity partnership program, in the last year that we supported a National Charity of the Year, staff partners raised about £290,000 for charity. In the first year that we moved to local, supporting local causes, they raised about £600,000 for local causes. And we researched things like, what did it do for staff morale? And 89% of the partners said it actually improved staff morale in the branches. We spoke to customers and said, well, what do you think about our approach? And actually 97%, was it 93%, essentially said, we love the fact that you support a local charity, keep supporting local. We'll leave the national charities to someone else. Which I thought was quite a phenomenal number because a lot of people, if you look at the research, most people give to national charities. They don't actually give to local charities. And what was even more fascinating was the feedback from the local causes themselves. Because the biggest thing that surprised us was the benefit that they got was, yes, it was great to get the money, but there were 2 other elements that they said was really beneficial. The first was increased local profile, because it helped them get more supporters in the local area, which was really important to them. And the second was it improved the morale of the people working in the local causes that we were supporting. because they were getting recognised for the work they were doing. So I think all around for us, going local has been really beneficial.
Can I just ask a follow-up question before? In terms of your core business, do your local branch managers take credit decisions, or do they get punted to head office?
Oh, well, I think there is a framework and there are risk appetites. So
What's
I
the
think
credit,
that
what's
is,
the credit threshold that a local
you
branch
know, I
manager...
can't actually tell you that, I'm afraid, but I can find out
Is
for
your
you.
banking
Leo.
local, or is your charitable activity local?
I think all of it is local because our banking, to be honest, our banking is very local. So one of the interesting things about the way that we work is that if you look at our branch network, there is no data in our branches. And that's really important. So a lot of banks talk about we've removed sales targets. We remove sales targets, but we also stripped out all the data. So our people aren't focused on how many loans they're selling, etc. All they're focused on is the relationship with that customer.
That's interesting.
Which makes the work that we do from a community level not different to what we do as a bank. It actually makes it integral because it's about how you help the guys in the front line build relationships to get to know the people so that we can understand what does and doesn't serve them from a product point of view.
Oh, brilliant. So I'm thinking of Handelsbanken,
Yes.
the most profitable bank in the world, whose return on equity is 17%. And it's the branch managers who totally own the relationship and take the credit decisions, and they really get to know. And they're counter-cyclical, and they see the opportunities.
That they're also a lot smaller.
Yes.
So scale, I think, when you talk local, scale and local, I think is a really interesting
So we'll get
dimension.
in. We'll get in.
Yeah.
Can we have thoughts from...
Well, I think that leads scale directly to the, probably scrappiest startup on the stage. Community Clothing is really new. We're sort of 9 months old. We launched in March last year as a Kickstarter campaign, but we date our kind of real life from September after the end of that Kickstarter.
Can you give a quick, with your perspective, can you give a quick comment also on...
So I think I'm acutely aware of what a privilege it is to be sort of 9 months old with 2, maybe 3 decision makers, depending how scrappy we're all feeling in the room at any one time, with a really fierce but small group of customers who support us. We are lucky as hell to be in that situation. And as a social enterprise, being local is part of the DNA of the idea. So I can't do any of it without that.
Yeah.
That means that it isn't an afterthought, and it's not something that I'm trying to kind of put on as a veneer over the top. It just is in the core of what we do.
And does that sound like localism, what Bola's described to you?
I think I suppose what I'm saying is there's a fundamental difference between the way we get to behave, and I'm aware of the difference between having an enormous organisation that has to adapt to a customer perspective and a change in circumstances. I think some of it, I can understand, I think some of it will always feel kind of like a response as opposed to a sort of something that is in the integral part of the idea. Having said that, I think, as you were talking about the sort of morale from a staff, and I can understand from an internal comms perspective that's, hugely powerful. But then I think the reason that that's successful is then when you have the same levels of uplift in the people that you're partnering with outside your own four walls, that's suddenly then genuinely local. But I think you need both parts of that, otherwise it feels one-dimensional.
Can we get your thoughts too? And then I want to hear Mike's perspective and then get you both to comment again.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. So apart from the staff morale, which is obviously a good thing, did you see any other company-wide benefits to the kind of going local things that you'd put in place? And discounting what happened to the charities, because that's also a good thing. But in terms of like your business benefits, what happened?
So some of the things, so the things that we track, essentially, we don't track, for example, the classic one that I get asked, well, how many bank accounts do people open because you go local? We don't track that. What we do get, interestingly, is a lot of anecdotal evidence about the way people value the fact that we are trying to be more local, and the investment that our people are putting into local communities. So that's quite interesting. So that definitely gets recognised, and I can only give the anecdotal evidence. So, for example, with our schools programme, one of the things that we make sure is that we never give our materials. It's about our people connecting with the local schools and going back and going back and going back, so building that relationship. And we do get feedback from teachers, because we focus on our primary schools primarily. We get feedback from teachers and parents saying, gosh, we don't see that elsewhere because it's that relationship based. So anecdotally, we think that it has that positive benefit. The other thing that I do find actually is that when you're a fledgling business and you have an aspiration, and that for us that aspiration is around local banking, to be the local bank within Britain, we also recognise that we are not there yet. Doing something like this actually shows the rest of the business what you can do. So at the moment, when you talk local banking for Britain and say, well, TSB, what do you do? For example, local lending, our SME proposition is minuscule, it's something that we hope to build. It gives people a flavour as to how we can do it. And we were the first area in the bank that actually went hyper-local. So you can't, I know, Mike's thinking, gosh, you can't imagine how hard it is to get a personalised poster into a branch because no one's actually ever done that before. So it's we're not there yet, but I think, for us it's around saying, well, people really are connecting with the fact that we are trying to get there. Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I just trying to understand why you would do that. So if it's not to open more bank accounts, and I'm going to make it like a really basic, simple thing because I don't actually understand that much about banking. But if it's not to open more bank accounts or to kind of like sell more mortgages, then why would you do it?
So we're a business at the end of the day. So we do need to open more bank accounts, and we do need to sell, we do need to sell more mortgages. At the end of the day, we are a business. But when you're a relationship-based business, so the bit about the sales data, I think, is really, really critical. It's not something we talk about all the time, but if we think about it this way, so the people who work in TSB branches, on average, have worked there for 16 years. So imagine pitching up to work after 16 years, for those of us who sit at a computer, and we don't have a computer anymore. We're told that we have to do our job, but we won't have this really major thing. And in banking, that major thing was targets and the sales culture and bonuses. That drove people's behaviors. So we took all of that away. And actually, we put everyone in the bank through a training program, which is around essentially recognizing people as individuals, which seems like a strange thing.
How to do that.
Well, I think in some ways, actually, there are a lot of people, 16 years, average. I've worked with people who have worked in the industry for 30 plus years, so average 16 years. So you have to give them new tools. Yeah. And so for us, those new tools is a relationship.
We better pause there, because
I could talk all night about this.
Absolutely brilliant.
I will not.
Mike, you've done amazing stuff, Marks and Spencer's, and I know you've got a new whole thing you've just launched. So give us what's the most exciting stuff going on in the area of localism.
Sure. Thanks, Leo. There was some really interesting research came out last year after the whole Brexit vote, and it classified individuals as either from somewhere or anywhere. And I guess many people in this room are anywhere. So you're people of the world, you have a broad world view. And I think the discussion we're having up here is exactly the same about corporations or businesses. You're either from somewhere or anywhere. And an anywhere business, it's a digital business, it's probably phenomenally successful, it floats above society, offers you great service, you get great products at great prices very, very quickly to your front door. But what does it put back into the place that you live in? And that probably is the most profound question that lies in this room. And the challenges that you were just offering there are exactly the challenges that M&S faces. We're but 5-10% along the journey to be truly, truly local. 98% of what M&S sells is its own private label product. It's the same product in Truro as it is in Aberdeen. So we're not seeking to localise in terms of product. We're seeking to localise in terms of footfall and customer service, which I'll come back to in a minute. Now, we've just launched a new plan. I'm not going to go into that now. You might have seen it online. 3 big things. We're going to be a zero-waste business, help 10 million people live happy and healthy lives. Put that to one side for tonight. We're going to help transform 1,000 communities across the British Isles, those 1,000 being the communities that M&S serves. We're going to start with 10. We're going to go look at 10 communities. Durry in Northern Ireland, Glasgow, Merthyr Tydfil. We're going to look at Bradford, Rochdale, Middlesbrough, Liverpool. We're going to look at Norwich, Newham here in London, and Birmingham as well, And we're going to make sure that we don't just do bits and pieces in these communities. Every M&S store is now volunteering with its local community, creating local jobs, donating surplus food, And to be fair, all the big supermarkets do that. Any of the big supermarkets could sit here and talk about that. M&S is seeking in a measurable way to go beyond that and truly understand what it means to be a local business, say 10% of the journey done so far. And why are we doing it? Because fundamentally, in the short term, you will have no footfall if you sit by the wayside and let Anywhere businesses just sell a digital offer to people, unless you can give people the humanity and warmth and desire to be in a shop, somewhere where literally everybody knows your name. You're going to lose out on price, you're going to lose out on speed to market, you just ain't going to win. So that community offer that you have is both a hindrance if you look at it through one lens, but a huge opportunity if you look at it another. And again, the ability to differentiate yourself as a from somewhere business will be incredibly important in the next decade. But that's just the beginning. That's the fight over the next 5 years. The true battleground is how we consume in the future is going to be changed radically as well. And this is about Marks and Spencer preparing for a very different way by which we consume, probably in decades' time. It'll be decentralized, it'll be personalized, it'll be about well-being, not just in terms of the physical food that you sell to people, nutrition, but emotional well-being and your connection with those that surround you. It'll be about sharing. It'll be about finance in a different way, crowdfunding, for example. So if we just sit on the sidelines waiting for that to happen in 10 years' time, the world will overtake us. The upstarts will come in, they will kick the incumbents out. We'll see a very, very different marketplace. So we're preparing strategically for a radical shift in how we consume. So footfall now, different consumption models in the future. And just to finish off, I mean, just some brief tactical stories about what this means in practice. So we work with our good friends at Neighbourly to ensure that every M&S store is donating surplus food at the end of the night to a local food bank. Again, all the supermarkets do it. What Neighbourly's allowed us to do is just bond our people with that food bank and the issue and the people living in food poverty in that community as well. Volunteering in that food bank as well as donating at the end of the day. Community energy, I've spoken to you in the past about the M&S energy business, supporting local energy schemes across the UK. Now, at the moment, the energy we pipe into people's home is grid. It's coming from the grid, very good partners behind us providing it, but it's grid. 5, 10 years' time, that might be very, very different in terms of the service we're providing to individual homes, individual communities as well. We talked about healthy high streets in the past, M&S working with other businesses to protect 100 high streets across the UK. Because I don't care, we ain't going to solve this on Marks and Spencer's own unless Boots want to do it, WH Smiths want to do it, Greggs want to do it, and the other supermarkets want to do it. Those high streets will wither around us, so you have to do it in partnership. I've spoken to you before about swapping, encouraging people not to throw clothing away but to recycle it. That's a giant circular sustainable model, fantastic, ticks all the boxes, but its manifestation is local. 600 M&S shops working with 750 local Oxfam shops to take the donated clothing to the Oxfam shop as well. And then the final point. I made the point at the beginning about 98% of our food, in fact, all our products, is M&S product that's the same in every store. I ain't going to differentiate probably the sausage that I offer across the UK, but I tell the customer who is making that product. So to me, making things local is not just a geography local, it's making it personal and connected. So the beef might come from Orkney, but meet the farmer who's produced it, see the value you've created for their life from buying it from us, wherever in the UK it may be. So there's a journey forward for us geography-wise, there's a journey forward in terms of personalisation of the offer. But be very, very clear, the reason it's at the heart of Planet 2025 going forward, and this desire to change 1,000 communities, is not community activity per se and CSR per se. This is about having a winning business model in the future.
I think that there's so much to say about all of that. And I think for me, perhaps the bit that makes me feel the most uncomfortable is when we start talking about supply chain and manufacturing locally, particularly because I consider ourselves at Community Clothing champions of British manufacturers. And I think there is, in all of these conversations, there is a sort of risk, I think, that when we talk about local, we use it as a euphemism for the really, really small guys. And the thing is, often they are really, really small guys. You know, in a factory in Blackburn, there's probably 35 people on the payroll. It's tiny. And so whilst that's okay, I think what that requires then, when in terms of the small guy's relationship with big business, is if you want to benefit, and believe me, I don't think there's a better time ever to be from telling a consumer story about buying local and it was made around the corner and all of those things. But I think if you want to benefit from that as a massive multinational company, you have to also put as much time and energy in all of the community stuff as you are in the structures in your own organisation that make sure that the really boring small stuff, the stuff that the small guys live or die by, so, you know, paying them on time, making sure that, you know, the deals, the individual deals, are the difference between whether you can pay them at the end of the week or you can't. Because I think sometimes when we talk about this, you know, this isn't sort of charming elves making something over here for the love of it, although often, you know, there's a lot of love and a huge amount of pride in that process, particularly in, you know, we work with 7 factories and 6 key suppliers here in the UK. They aren't doing it for the love of it. It's real jobs, real people, clocking in and clocking out. And I think where we're talking about big versus small and, you know, multinational versus local, there is some boring detail on the local, and I think when you're talking about, you know, having made 5-10% of the journey, the plea I would make is that there be a focus on that boring small stuff.
I think it's a brilliant distinction, if I can chip in, between local and small. You could have something that's local, i.e. it is somewhere, but could be very big. How small is your smallest sausage producer?
Oh, well, I mean, we've got food suppliers that are tiny. I mean, it's basically a farmer that's producing a small amount of product that uniquely goes into M&S shops, right through to the world's biggest sandwich factories. So we are operating right across that scale. We work with 13,000 British farmers, some tiny, you know, man and his son, some very, very big operations now, huge acreage in terms of what they do. So I absolutely buy into what you're saying here. And I think we're going to see a huge challenge to globalization in the next decade, not just for ethical reasons and morality reasons, who's paying tax, whatever, but how are things produced quickly, personally, for the marketplace. People don't want to buy the same product as everybody else in the marketplace is wearing. So the desire to produce something quickly and personally will become all-consuming. So you will need to have supply chains that don't just cut across the world, but are right next to your shop. They might be underneath your shop, ultimately, in terms of making stuff very, very rapidly.
I'm in this place where I'm just sort of pinging backwards and forwards and kind of like agreeing with you and then totally disagreeing with you. And I'm doing it all in my head and sort of sitting here going, oh
Give
my
us
God.
Give us the disagreement.
I have a thing about both banks and clothes, about being
A good thing about
well, about like being local with banks and clothes, right? But sorry, just to go back to the banking thing again. But like if I go in for a mortgage and I have a bad relationship with this person and they turn me down for a mortgage because of some human trait that I know, and I'm sure you would train for that not to be the case, but I kind of want a computer to tell me yes or no to a certain extent. And then when I go into an M&S, I want to know that they're going to have like the pants that I know that they have in Truro because I'm on holiday in Glasgow. So there's kind of a bit of there's a good thing about being a big brand there.
Very
Do you know what I
loyal
mean?
on the pants front, something.
You all know where my pants are from now. Damn. So there's that on that front. I think that's true. But I also totally see the benefit in being local and really truly benefiting your community. I'm a bit of a cynic, and so if I saw that stuff, I'd be like, oh yeah, right, they just want my loyalty, but maybe that's because I think about it too much. But you know, I think loyalty is the true nugget of the thing there. And when you said that, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what you want.
Can I just drill in?
Without it, you know.
Can I just drill in?
Anyway.
Because you really threw me by saying that you've got these tiny, single, 1 acre sausage. What proportion? I know that's the wrong. What proportion of your? I can't do this question right. What proportion of the stuff you sell fits into that category, where it's really, truly locally produced within a 10-mile radius, 20-mile radius?
Oh, I mean, again, let's be very clear. We do not claim to go down the 30-mile geography route by store. So we will be buying from small farmers who are offering us a small amount of product that we put into multiple different stores. But that store might be 200, 300, 400 miles away from where it's produced. So we're not into, I think, heavily as M&S into the food miles discussion.
Is that part of the dream? I'm thinking of your tomatoes.
Okay.
And we've all eaten the Marks & Spencer Santini tomato. Tell us about Tell us about the provenance of the Santini tomato.
But again, you have
No, the Santini tomato.
I'm
Santini.
going to answer that question. But remember, there are certain geographies, certain parts of Britain that grow certain things, but not others.
Yes,
You're never going to be in a position where one city can be supported by 500 farms around them producing
But is there a town in Italy
7,000.
called Santini that grows the Santini tomatoes?
There are several different farmers that produce it. Some will be down in Spain, some will be in the UK, depending on the season where you grow. So I think what we're saying here is globalization will change. We've got a monoculture at the moment of just everything's made through global supply chains. And I'm saying the world is much more nuanced in the future. You'll have hyper-local production. You will have global production. And the businesses that prosper in the future, certainly the incumbents, are the ones that can actually work across that spectrum from one day they're ordering from Bangladesh, one day they're ordering from Blackburn.
And I don't think I'm trying to say, I'm not suggesting that we all need to make everything on the doorstep. I think that's naive, and of course not. It's much more about, I think, protecting those relationships. And there's a lot of talk about partnership in community, and I just that means as much the people that you buy from and the people at the sort of the grubbier end of your supply chain as it does the sort of headline acts. And I think that's my point about behaviour, that it's about the detail of that as much as it is about kind of telling someone that it was made around the corner. I don't think and that would be unrealistic for you guys at your scale. Of course it would.
And it's a point.
Equally, I've got loads of customers who absolutely, our labels in the back of our jeans and our outerwear and our t-shirts all have made in Blackburn. And are they fiercely loyal in Blackburn to that stuff? Bloody hell they are, you know. And I want to expand that sense in all of the places that we work.
Can you tell us about your business? Tell us about,
Yes.
give us the vision, the dream.
So everything we do is focused on the sustaining and creating of skilled jobs here in the UK. One of the major problems with being a British manufacturer in clothing and textiles is the seasonality of demand, because obviously fashion is a very is a kind of strict calendar, and so if you're a knitwear factory, you have times of the year where you are incredibly busy and other times of the year where there's absolutely no work at all. Well, you try sustaining any business with that model, that's a nightmare. So we take what we know is a real problem on the supply side, that they have these big gaps in the production calendar. And we take what we know on the demand side, which is this increasing desire for consumers to buy more locally and to buy things that they know were done decently. And until we existed, I don't really think there was a way, even if you really wanted to, as a consumer in this country, to buy British and to feel proud about that. That was a really expensive thing to do. And so price is really important. We work really, really hard to keep our price down, and it will only go lower as we scale. Because without having a huge audience, I can't create and sustain hundreds of thousands of jobs, which is our overall ambition. So we take that demand and we produce only in factory downtime a collection of clothes that will never change and will only keep adding to it for both men and women, of classic, design classics, seasonless things, so a white t-shirt, a Harrington jacket, raincoat, jeans, the stuff that we all wear. And we produce it in that downtime. It's cost engineered, so we use the same fabric across all our men's and women's outerwear, for example, the same shirt and cotton wherever we can to get those efficiencies of scale there. The clothes are designed with a view to simplifying their structure, which A, gives it a very pared back aesthetic, but also makes it, we minimize the sewing operations. And we then sell directly to customer. So we sell currently through our own website. We're doing a series of pop-up shops and various events, and we partnered earlier in the year with Selfridges as part of their Material World campaign, which we headlined a sort of 6-week tour of community clothing pop-up shops in all of their regional stores. We're now online with Selfridges, and whilst I won't go into the detail, the sort of financial arrangement there is one in which they are entirely supportive of us, and I think maybe have made 50p. Because we can't have huge markups, and the sort of usual retail wholesale structure just doesn't work for us. So we keep our price really as low as we can, and then so we have already created we've just retallied, we've started tallying the working hours every month, and it's now 6,888 as of last week. That number obviously increases all the time. We've taken it in 9 months from I think 17 products at launch to 93 I just put into press day. We want to keep adding to those factories. I'm at a meeting tomorrow which is discussing 9 new potential collaborations that we can do with factories. And importantly, we don't work in the same way with each of them. So this isn't a kind of, hello, new knitwear factory. If you want to work with us, it looks like this, because obviously that's a ridiculous way to behave. So, so the way it works in Blackburn, for example, at Cookson and Clegg is we would cut stuff when they have room on the cutting floor where there's a bit of time there. It sits there, and then if a zip doesn't arrive for another job, which happens all the time because it's being held in customs, then our stuff just goes down onto the line. Now that works there, but it wouldn't work for knitwear because that's just not where their seasonality works. So on top of all of that, I mean, I think that would be enough in terms of kind of the stuff that we're doing. So in terms of local, we have a shop in Blackburn, which is run in collaboration with the council and with Bootstrap, who are a back-to-work agency. So again, this focus on reskilling and pathways to employment. We've just done a project with 20 schools that are all about design. Where I need a poster, I get Blackburn College to design it. It's also because I've got absolutely no money, so that's nice. But it means that we're giving people access to a world that is all about jobs. And if you are 16 and you live in Blackburn and you don't know anyone with a job, then actually doing a schools competition to design a jacket and coming to the factory and having Patrick and I should say, I always miss him out, it's all founded by Patrick Grant, who you might know from Savile Row, or at the other end of the spectrum, the Great British Sewing Bee. So we have this network, which is partly to do with his expertise across decades in the fashion industry, but also from a design point of view, we work with an award-winning design team who do lots of other stuff. And then in terms of our community engagement, I think probably Bootstrap is the best example of this. So I couldn't run a shop in Blackburn if I didn't have a partnership, and a true partnership, in Bootstrap. So they work with the long-term unemployed, and it's about giving them, often, frankly, the confidence to go for the job interview at what is often Poundland around the corner. But we use the shop as a space for training, and then we've just seconded one of their senior trainers in order to run our warehousing and our sort of back-end stuff in Blackburn, because what I want to do is, as we grow, I want him to be the person that structures that, both for the business, but also so that it can be structured from the word go as a training opportunity for those people. And I think that's probably, we do loads of stuff. We just did a community quilt with 100 people contributed it to age 4 to, I think, 87. It was charming. And that stuff is good. And I think I was a bit cynical about the small stuff. As we went into it, it sounded like a nice idea. But the bottom line is, the same principles that you're talking about apply to us. So footfall on our nearly derelict street in Blackburn on a good Saturday where it isn't raining is 2 people. That's looking at stuff, not buying. That's just 2 people. We've got a coffee machine, so they can have a coffee, or a Vimto. That's not great. Those numbers are bad. And on during the Festival of Making in Blackburn, where we did this brilliant celebratory thing, I think we had 500 people in that store over those 2 days. We had 2 sewing machines going for the entire time. They didn't stop. And I came away from that thinking, actually, whilst we have huge grand ambitions for when we're big to rework how apprenticeships work and have sewing schools over here, actually, in the short term, I think our job is not to do that. It's to get the 16-year-old on the factory floor. It's to make the community quilt with, maps of Blackburn where someone's aunt had a shop and a piece of a woman's wedding dress. Because what you can't quantify, without wishing to sound sentimental about it, is literally stitching together the fabric of a nation in that room. And the atmosphere, not just in our shop, but in Blackburn, was incomparable to, and I spent a lot of time there, to any of the other occasions that I visited. We were all fiercely proud of what was going on in that room, and most squares were this big. And I think that's sometimes enough.
Can we pause there for a second? A fantastic story. Yeah. Bola Mike, is this business financeable by a mainstream bank? Is it stockable in an M&S store with all the social and economic benefits embodied in those products?
So I'm not a banker, I should say. I do work for one though, but I'm not one. So I wouldn't be able to make that decision. However, I would absolutely back you, Lucy. But however, I mean, I think what's really fascinating though. No, I think what's really fascinating is this idea of knitting communities and how we're almost having to relearn how to build a community again. So similar
but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen if it doesn't get financed. It'll go out of business. So
but there are so many different. There are lots of different ways of. I honestly couldn't even make a decision because
Do you
those
feel
are business
that there
decisions.
might
And,
ever
and
be a
also
bank
the
that
other
will
question
finance
is
you?
whether or not actually that's the kind of
Yeah.
financing that you'd be
I think
looking
that's the thing.
for.
I mean,
don't
you know, we are actually looking to raise money sort of now, not actually because we need to, but because the quickest route to making the social impact that we, you know, judge our success by is by accelerating that. We currently run it on, well, we jokingly say we run it on old buttons that we found out the back, which, and actually an awful lot of favours. And I think that's something that, you know, again, when I talked earlier about recognising the privilege of running a startup at this stage with this kind of heart at the idea, I get to work with incredible people who gift their time to this venture because they believe in it. So the ex-head of supply chain and sustainability at Burberry has just joined us. We get to work with amazing photographers like Tom Bunning, who did this beautiful tour of the country to kind of capture what actually has come back as a, you know, really vibrant portrait of modern working Britain that I'm really proud of. So we are looking to do that, but and I'm very open to those conversations, but certainly not. I think at the moment we are in the lucky position of having more interesting things to say no to than the other way around. And that is the sign, and I can speak as an ex-advertising person, that is the sign of a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, sorry,
So the banking piece aside, I think what's really fascinating is, you know, how we have to almost relearn what local community is all about, and we're seeing that as well. So, you know, the way that our people are responding when the community responds to them.
Yeah.
Because we're supporting locals. So again, you know, these anecdotal stories, so very, very simple stories that we get coming back to us, say, you know, we're running a bake sale, which, you know, the whole banking industry is fueled by cake. But, you know, we're running a bake sale in the local branch. A customer came in, they hadn't been in for ages. They saw the local charity that we were supporting. They immediately wrote a check for that charity because they were so blown away by the fact that we were supporting that local charity. And it's around how, you know, and that's just people reconnecting with people
And it's
face
really
to face.
simple. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing, it's really simple.
It's so
the
simple.
community quill is really, really simple. And we have a brilliant supporter in the council in Blackburn, Phil Riley, who described it brilliantly as, you know, this is just us remembering what we were good at.
Yeah.
So, you know, we get talked about a lot in a kind of, you know, we're swooping in and sort of with this heroic idea and saving things, but it isn't about rescue, it's about revival. And I think that, you know, when he said that, it was just with total clarity. Blackburn is a cotton town. So the fact that we are just reviving that sense. It's, you know, we're talking a lot when we say local about just about place, but it's about the culture that would have been defined by that town having employed hundreds of thousands of people doing that thing.
Mike, can we have a quick comment from you and then we...
Yeah, and to ask the question, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? What does success look like for you?
I've just been on holiday and I don't think it's helped because I've come back really sort of ambitious. I probably have quite a different answer to that today than a week ago when I was a bit tired. I think we would like to be as big as Bowden, and then I would also like to be, definitely within 5 years, doing this. I'd like to sell all over the world. So we've always had a lot of interest from Japan, which is always a great sign, even from a design point of view. But there's no reason why you couldn't mirror this model in the US. There's a lot of very similar conversations to the one we're having tonight about, you know, made in America, and so I think it's kind of ripe for that. I think we could learn a lot and then copy it elsewhere. And I would like to have really changed the way young people in towns that have had the heart ripped out of them through the sort of sheer deprivation. I would like to change the way that looks. I want to widen their horizons significantly, whilst not asking them to move out of their town.
And what's your point of difference? Are you a brand, or you're a manufacturer, or you're vertically integrated?
Well, we are a brand. We sort of call ourselves loosely, we operate like a cooperative. So within the network of 7 manufacturers, we consider them part of the crew. We work with them all, as I said, in different ways. We also happen to own a manufacturer, which I think is, or rather Patrick does as part of the bigger business. And that's a really interesting thing, actually, because I think it gives us real intimate insight to what those problems look like on the ground. And it certainly gives us confidence elsewhere. But I think it allows us to test ideas, and when they don't work, retreat and do it again. And of course, in any startup, that happens, you know, almost daily. So we're a strange hybrid.
Thank you.
Would you take equity in this company?
Personally?
Okay. Tell us about Code Club.
Yeah, sure. I would if I had any money.
Thank you. Get your wallet out.
Yeah.
No, just buy something. That would be nice.
Yeah,
Socks,
I will.
£4.50.
Right. I've just got a list of questions rather than my own notes here. Right, so yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about Code Club. So Code Club is after school or extracurricular coding clubs for children aged 9 to 13. And they work for their local community. And they're entirely created so people can help their own local communities. And they're designed around the volunteers who have the belief that teaching kids to code is the right thing to do, and they have the passion and the time to go and make that happen. So we've designed a service that gives our volunteers everything that they need to easily provide that service to their community. And every pain point that they tell us about, we try and find a scalable solution for that, assuming that more than one person is having this problem. But at the same time, it's important not to homogenize and kind of say that every Code Club is the same. They're absolutely not. The whole Code Club model is extremely flexible, and it allows for lots of individuality and creativity. Of course, every Code Club is going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. You have a different volunteer with a different set of children and a different venue operating a different time of day and a different time of the week. And we often go into the Code Clubs and then come back out and tell each other stories about what we've seen and what this kid said and what this volunteer said. And it's their individuality that makes them really different and interesting. And so by creating a really friendly brand that kind of calls itself a club, we're trying to build a movement that kids and adults all want to belong to. And we work with local communities on lots of different levels, so not just in kind of volunteers going into schools to run these coding clubs, but we also work with local councils and local authorities. So having that buy-in from kind of the top really means that we can encourage teachers to welcome Code Club into their schools at the same time. We apply for local funding. So Tower Hamlets is a good example of this. We worked with Tower Hamlets Council, and then we received funding from Canary Wharf Group. From Canary Wharf Group, big shout out for them there, who funded us in our work in particular to try and make sure that there was a Code Club in every primary school in the Tower Hamlets region, and we're up to like 75%, so we're doing well, but a little bit more to go there. And so at the same time that we're doing that, we create lots of high quality content. So we write projects that we give to our volunteers, and each of those projects will create something different. So a child will work through the project and they'll create like a game or an application or a website using various different programming languages. And we know that these projects are really good. Right? We know that they're good, so we can ensure that children are having a really high quality experience and that they're learning good things if they're using these projects. And it means that then the volunteer is free to kind of make little adjustments to the club and make it really individual and bring in their old broken computer and take it apart and put it back together again and do lots of fun stuff like that, which gives it its own kind of personality. And so more recently, we've started to grow Code Club outside of the UK, which is where it was founded. We've set up a social franchise model where we work with NGOs in other countries who share the same goals as us, and they think it's important that we teach kids to code as well. They recognize the value that Code Club can bring with its projects and with our brand that's already grown so much already. And they want to share in that. And so they do. So far we have 10 partners outside the UK. I'll name a couple of them. So Australia have managed to start 1,600 clubs, Code Club Brazil at 300, and many other partners, so South Korea, Spain, France, Ukraine, or Croatia. I can't remember them all now. And so far, we've managed to start 10,000 Code Clubs around the world. So that's pretty cool. And they're all different, and that's what's really awesome about it. But at the same time, I went to a code club in rural Sydney, like just outside Sydney, and it was in a pretty deprived area of the country, to be honest. And they asked me questions for ages. And the one they were most excited about was when they said, oh, and I was telling them that there were code clubs in Brazil. And they were like, what? That's amazing. So there's children in Brazil doing fish chomp. So fish chomp is a project. That's just not a random set of words that I'm saying. And they were absolutely blown away by that. So I kind of think that there's amazing connections to be made there around groups of children doing the same thing around the world, but in like slightly different contexts. Yeah, that's enough.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Can I propose that we throw... What is that? A storm?
It's God.
It's fantastic. Can I propose that we all chip in, but we completely welcome, especially immediately relating, first of all, to Code Club, which I completely love as an example, and there's fantastic stuff across the board. Okay, so comments, questions from the floor.